Hello, 7th grade Bobcats. Mr. Flato here. Welcome back to what I hope will be another great week and a great semester here for you at the Helena Middle School. We're already on to second semester. That means you got a fresh slate. Things that you were doing great first semester, do more of those. Things that you weren't doing so great, let's try to get that fixed. On today's B.O.B lesson, I'm going to talk about a phenomenon known as perception and how we as human beings perceive things. So many interpersonal disagreements, meaning disagreements between you and another person or two different people, come from a difference in perception. Also, perception is very important to think about how you're being perceived by others. You may do something a certain way and know the idea or the reason behind why you're doing that, where it gets perceived or it's looked at by a second and third party as being something different. So kind of a higher level of thinking today on today's B.O.B lesson. Let's get rocking and rolling on this. Hope you guys go out and make it a great week at the Helena Middle School. All right, this week's B.O.B lesson is going to be called The Power of Perception. But first, let's be our best this week at Helena Middle School. Let's be safe, let's be responsible, let's be respectful. All right, to start this B.O.B lesson today, I want to ask you guys a few questions. In this first one, how many boards or it looks like square railroad tied looking things do you see? Notice if you're looking at from the left, you can clearly see that there are 4 railroad ties there. If you look at it from the right, it looks like there are 3. How about this one? An elephant here. Can you count how many legs this elephant has? Does this elephant have 4 legs or does this elephant have 8 legs? It's kind of an optical illusion, some of these. How about this one for some of you people that are more in the artistic realm? What color is this box? Is it blue? Is it gray? Is it navy? Is it a different color that maybe I haven't mentioned? And finally, we have a couple gentlemen here that are looking at this number, and one on the left is arguing that it's a 6, while the one on the right is arguing that it is a 9. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, what am I talking about with those 4 pictures that I just showed you? Well, I'm talking about something very important called perception, and I went to the dictionary here and got you guys a definition of what perception is. The first definition is the ability to see, hear, become aware of something using our senses. The normal limits to human perception is how it may sound used in a sentence. The second definition is the state of being or process of becoming aware of something through the senses, the perception of rain. And my favorite definition, which I think best sums it up, is a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. Used in a sentence could be Hollywood's perception of the tastes of the American public. So what perception is it's using our senses to interpret something which ends up becoming our reality. And this is so important when we think about interacting with one another, when we think about taking information in and making our own decisions about what's what, who is who. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the following slides as to why perception is so. One of the most powerful sayings is perception is reality. What do people mean when they say perception is reality? We live in a world where everyone is constantly using their senses to interpret and make their own reality using their perception. If you think about the guys in the beginning where one side is looking at a 6, one side is looking at a 9, they're never going to agree on what that number is based on their own perception or how many railroad ties are there. How people perceive a situation to be is going to become their reality. Well, where does this get us in trouble? This gets us in trouble because we're all unique, different, individual people. And when we come together and we have a disagreement on a situation, everybody has their own perception of the situation. And so many times we get in these arguments or we get in these interpersonal debates where we feel like we're beating our head against the wall trying to get the other person to see our perception or to see our point of view. And it's really tricky sometimes because each of us have our own perceptions, and those perceptions make our own reality. How they perceive you to be, how other people perceive you to be, is going to become their reality of how they view you. And that's super important to think about in terms of going through life and perception and how other people are viewing you and how that makes up their mind about. So knowing that we're all different, knowing that we all have different perceptions and those perceptions become our own individual realities, how can we use this information to grow as young people or to grow as human beings? The first thing we can do is we have to get to a point where we see life both through our own lens, that is our own perceptions about how things are, and the lens of others. When we can do this, this lends us to the understanding of other people. We should always try to see other people's point of views, where they're coming from, especially when we have disagreements, especially when friendships and relationships. In any sort of relationship, we have to have an awareness of how we see things through our perception and how we see things, how in many situations in life, other people's perceptions become their reality, even if their perception is different than yours. And where you guys may run into this a lot is with authority figures, maybe your parents, maybe your teachers. Your teachers perceive a situation being different than it is, and that's where coming back to my first bullet point is so very important. So when you have disagreements with authority figures, you need to understand that you may see the situation one way, authority figures see it another way, and sometimes that is unfair, but that becomes the reality. We also need to be aware of what we project or what we put out there, the energy, the body language, the affect that we put out there into the world. Because a lot of times what we project can become someone else's perception of you and therefore can become their reality. Maybe a classic situation of this is when you're being off task or you're being goofy and silly, teachers or other people can perceive that maybe you are a goofball or maybe you are the class clown, and then that becomes their reality of the situation or of you, and then that's how we form reputations. So we always got to think about the energy that we're projecting out there, the body language that we're putting out there, and sometimes this can be unfair because sometimes we project things that aren't really reality, and then it comes back to bite us in the butt. All right, this week's quote of the week is, most disagreements are caused by different perceptions that created different realities. And if there's one thing that I hope you guys learned from this B.O.B lesson today, it is that we are all unique individuals and we all have unique perceptions of reality and perceptions of different situations, different perceptions of just everything. And if there's one thing I would hope you would take away, it's having that awareness, and also having the awareness that we need to look at life through our own lens and make our own decisions, but also acknowledge that other people are going to look at life through their own lens, and a lot of times nobody has to be right. You're not right, they're not right. You each have your own perception. Find middle ground, find compromise. All right, that brings us to this week's Jellybean Question of the Week winners. Madison Weisgerber, Logan Wilkins, Bryn Woodmansey, Lily Erickson, and Maddie Kinnett. The answer is a penny. This week's Jellybean Question of the Week is, when can you add 2 to 11 and get 1? If you think you know the answer, submit your answer to the Bob box. Get it in there by Friday. Tune in next week to see if you're a winner. Let's go out and make it a great week at D. Helena Middle School.